gonna fill our Saturday mornings with when Bleach is done. The 9 and 9:30 slot just feels special right now. Every week is peak episode after peak episode. Episode 44, The Perfect Crimson, finally brought the demon to the battlefield. But before we get to Kenpachi's Bankai, I want to go over some added additions in the opening sequence. So we know that the three worlds are collapsing in on each other, and we see that directly in the sky as hollows are walking amongst the world of the living. However, Kubo likes to rely on auspicious imagery to portray themes. In chapter 1, it's starting off with the Hell Butterflies, the Jikukucho. And then in the Hell One Shot, it was the Twin Goldfish. Now we're seeing a crow. If you're not familiar, the crow is actually associated to Makala, who is a Buddhist deity. Now, Makala is known as the Great Black One. They act as a fierce protector deity. Now, if you saw my video on Ryatsu colors, which you would have if you were subscribed to my channel and had alerts turned on, but all joking aside, if you're new here, please do so you don't miss out on any of my analysis covering Bleach and other anime and manga, then you already know, like we see in the anime, the color black is at the center of Bleach lore. Black represents the absolute authority of Ichigo. It also represents the Ryatsu of the Soul King, and we've speculated time and time again that there are some links to the Hell Arc coming up, and I think this is another link, seeing the crow look at the worlds merging all back into one, because a world that is merged into one is the primordial state of the world, which is also a world where hell is back part of the cycle. As we know, life and death in Buddhism exist as one. In a primordial world, that's what happened. Life and death existed as one. That is the true state of the world. Moving on from there, we do get some expanded information from this scene also with Ukitake. He's still stabilizing out the world, but it's starting to waver, and that's why we do see the world starting to merge, but also the hollows walking through the human world. And I do believe what we see in this scene does play into what we learn in Can't Figure Your Own World, where they bring up the fact that because of these events, new religions and new cults started to form in the human world because they saw this merge happen and the collateral damage from what's happening in Soul Society. Now, getting to what a lot of us came for, Kenpachi versus Gerard was phenomenal. First off, the miracle is broken. And I want to pull your attention to something. I know the miracle is powerful, but there is something historically that I think is being portrayed through Gerard. Now, we see that he carries Norse aesthetic with the winged helmet and then the warrior design. And as he expands in size, he manifests a literal crown of thorns. Now, historically, when Christian missionaries converted Norse populations over to Christianity, they had to portray Christ as like this triumphant warrior king. They didn't believe the more compassionate, more, I would say, softer side of Christ would have enticed the Viking populations. So they portrayed him as someone who conquered death. And then Valkyries were transformed into these radiant warrior angels. If you remember correctly, Valkyries were the ones who had chosen fallen warriors who were worthy to be sent to Valhalla. The symbolism isn't lost on me, and you don't have to agree. This is just what I'm seeing. I believe Kubo really is trying to show us something about the broader world of Bleach through Gerard. For example, and this is a little bit out of left field, but I promise you it connects. Rukia and Ichigo in the game Bleach Brave Souls, where Kubo, if I'm not mistaken, he is the chief content creator for Bleach Brave Souls. He designed the Soul Ascension forms. They look heavenly, they look divine. Asnot had a Bible next to his bed before he joined the Stern Ritter and received his shrift. I do believe that heaven in some way, shape, or form exists within the world of Bleach, or the idea of heaven exists within the broader world of Bleach. And even if what I'm seeing is just symbolic and it's really not playing into the larger world of Bleach, placing it against Kenpachi, that was perfection. Bankai. First off, Kubo is a huge fanboy. He loves Toriyama. It happens all the time in Bleach. He has these little small moments that have nothing to do with the story, or sometimes it does, and he just pays homage to Toriyama, like right here, the Yamcha pose on Kenpachi, and then letting that lead into his Bankai. I mean, it's never going to overwrite the Yamcha pose. That's a staple in our community. However, seeing the way Kubo evolves it just for a one-time moment to get Kenpachi's Bankai off, that's amazing. Like, yes, this is the final course. Those moments let you know that we're getting to the end, but I am happy to see that Kubo has this much freedom. I love the way he used this scene right here. However, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Preceding all of that, I do want to talk about how Yachiru and Kenpachi are reunited through his Zanpakuto, which I think we have speculated that for quite some time, right? I already have a video just covering my theory from the past about his Zanpakuto and Bankai, and now we can all just see it come into fruition. I noticed that no matter how many times Kenpachi said Yachiru, she just kept proceeding on. And something that I speculated a long time ago is that Kenpachi's strength is just too much for him to handle. That's why it's so restricted. But he also doesn't really have a definitive Bankai or Shikai, meaning that his power is a lot like Ichigo's. Remember when Ichigo first attained Bankai? Outside of a visual change to his body, it was really just a speed and power amp. Getsuga Tensho, of course, got a power amp, but that projectile style attack that he had was already a part of his identity in Shikai. Broadly, that's exactly what Kenpachi's Bankai is. It's exactly like Ichigo's Bankai. Now, I'm not going to go into full detail in this video. That's the video following this one. There is a connection there. The speed amp, the power amp, the representation of him as a demon, technically the Mara, the anti-Buddha in Buddhism, that is all very, very intentional. The fight is very chaotic. It is wild. I love the way they cut the music away at very key moments to really emphasize what was happening. Starting the fight off with Kenpachi literally taking a chunk out of Gerard versus swinging his sword or his cleaver, that was a really great way to drive home that the person that we know as Kenpachi, who is already wild and animalistic, he can be communicated with. Byakuya is telling Toshiro, just how I am noticing, this version of Kenpachi, let's just watch from the sidelines, because what's ever happening, he has control of it. The only thing that he needs to get control over, and that's how the fight ends for Kenpachi, unfortunately, is that his abilities and his power in Bankai, it literally supersedes what his body can contain. And keep in mind, it's not like he's a human. He's made out of reishi. I like Adult Toshiro, the demeanor, the way he trash talks, his fight against Gerard, it was really cool. I love the choreography. I love the way he was sliding around, the boost to his freezing mechanics, and then stopping the shield. I want to point this out, but the sheer size of Gerard is beyond ridiculous, to the point where I think at this point in time, the shield is probably close or almost the same size as the meteor that Grimmy summoned, considering that if that shield would have hit the Cerete, that would have also destroyed the Cerete as well too. Now keep in mind, meteors that can destroy civilization, they start at a particular size, and at that point in time, they can just scale up to ridiculous heights and length. But looking at Gerard, I mean, that shield probably would have wiped out half the Rokungai, the Cerete. It would have done an immense amount of damage just because how large it was. I love the fact that when Toshiro was in trouble though, instead of Byakuya stepping in, they give Kenpachi another shot, and we see, missing one arm, he stops Gerard in his tracks. And that allows Toshiro to not only freeze Gerard, but then it sets up Byakuya. I don't want to like sound cheesy or anything like that, but they were kind of moving like a MOBA out there. Like their team synergy felt very MOBA-ish. You have Kenpachi, who's like your solo lane jungle hybrid. Then you have Toshiro, who can use crowd control effects, who can be either mid lane or support. And then you have Byakuya. He is your carry. He comes in at the end and he's going to get the final hit and he's going to wrap everything up. And something else I want to point out here too is that after this concludes, where we see Gerard go down, there's an evolution that happens with all three of these people. Kenpachi helping after he fails with his animalistic Bankai, even though he didn't technically fail, his power just superseded what he can handle. Then you have Toshiro. Toshiro's attitude is different. He still has that, you know, sarcastic, snarky side to himself with the trash talking, but the ability to joke. For example, when this concludes, you see Renji and Rukia show up and they hear Toshiro's voice, and Rukia is like, oh, that must be his older brother. And then Toshiro plays along with it, and you see Byakuya go like, you're gonna play along with that? Because that kind of is out of Toshiro's wheelhouse. that is a little bit different than the more serious side to himself when his body was shorter and he was presenting to be a younger person. And I think that's because his adult body allows him to have the confidence that he just doesn't have when he has his child body. And then on top of that, you have Byakuya. Not only is he just very upfront with how he feels, he's playing into the jokes, he grabs Rukia and Renji and he gets them to safety, but then also something that Toshiro picks up, and he tells, Byakuya that he should just say it next time, and Byakuya goes, actually, I did. He knows that in this situation, him, Toshiro, and Kenpachi, they have control of what's happening. Rukia and Renji, it's not that they can't help, they are much, much better off with Ichigo. And that's not because he doesn't think that they haven't grown, it's just that this is about friendship now. Toshiro, Kenpachi, they are his comrades. They are fellow Captain Shinigami. They're going to have that camaraderie between them. We've seen that before with Byakuya and Kenpachi back in Wako Mundo when they were taking on Yami. This is just now adding Toshiro to the equation. It doesn't mean that they're not friends. It's just that they have a responsibility and duty that is always going to supersede anything else because of their position. This is Ichigo's group of friends. Rukia and Renji are part of that group. They mean a little bit more to Ichigo in being there for him in his fight against Yhwach, or at least catching up to him, than whatever they could do trying to stick around with Byakuya and what's happening with Gerard. Now, technically, no spoilers, but if you've read the manga, we know that this is the close of the fight. I am wondering, moving forward, if Kubo is going to add additional scenes or if we're going to get the same ending that we got in the manga. I want to see more scenes because this is a great opportunity to bring in more. For example, we still have Isshin and Ryukin. Rangiku is out on the outskirts as well too. It's not that these people can show up and be the ultimate difference makers. It's just that their added help can elevate Kenpachi, Byakuya, and Toshiro for maybe one more round at Gerard Valkyrie before I believe, and I don't think Kubo is going to change the ending of this fight before we head into the inevitable ending that we know from the manga. Now, just like with other episodes throughout this season, we get the ending about 2/3 of the way in. We cut back to the Research and Development Institute, and we see that the situation is pretty dire. They have 0 high-ranking or even medium-ranking Shinigami left to go to Karakura Town to help out with the Hollow situation. However, Renosuke and Shino step up. They are the ones who are assigned to Karakura Town. They're afraid, however, to get some backup. I call it the coalition of the fodder. We get Afro Shinigami, who we should all know, Zenonosuke, and then we get former 3rd seat of the 1st Division, who's now co-lieutenant, Genshiro, and he's going to back them up in their journey into Karakura Town. Loki, looking back at the Vizard situation and just how useless they were, it would have been better if they would have been the ones to stick around to go help out with the Hollow situation and Karakura Town, considering their history and exile. That's the only complaint that I think I've ever really had about a decision that Kubo has made, is that I think it would have been better for them to be the ones assisting out on planet Earth versus just being fodder and somewhat useless in Soul Society. But I understand how the war went, where people were positioned at, and how things broke out. Just something that I'm thinking about towards the end of the episode and just kind of seeing how things play out. Everything about Horn of Salvation this week felt extremely powerful. What I loved is that this episode really brings together what I've always thought, is that when you listen to the lyrics of number 1, it actually sounds like it's talking about 2 people, Ichigo and Orihime. And their growth in this scene is capitalizing on not only their failure, but their success with Ukiura. If you remember, Ukiura is the conclusion of their journey, whereas 2 people who have these pasts that are eventually going to collide with each other, they are now at the stage where they recognize what they mean to each other. If Orihime wants to truly be by Ichigo and protect him, she has to not only find the strength within herself to manifest her own reality, but she has to externalize that for Ichigo as well too. That's where that whole scene with Nell comes in, back from Grimjow's fight, where she is telling Orihime she has to externalize and cheer for Ichigo. And then you have Ichigo, who realizes that he just can't do it by himself. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to end up letting your hollow take over and you lose control. This is the exact opposite. This is the final fight. Yhwach is the final villain, and you can see through Orihime's eyes that this version of Ichigo, who even says that the power is a part of him, is in full control. He has the kind eyes that Orihime is looking for, and he can also confirm that with her through conversation. Not to mention, our boy is fast. He got on the other side of her barrier and she didn't even realize it. We don't get a ton of this fight because it is the end of the episode, but this was some of the best art, the impact frames, everything leading into seeing Ichigo's Grand Rei Cero, Getsuga, Grand Rei Cero. It just felt right this time. The setup, the coloring. I remember when this whole thing started, the red tint was such a hot topic. It actually looks really, really good when you look at the color theory happening around the actual scene and seeing how it's incorporated. Everything just looked perfect. And I can't wait to see more next episode. I hope that they actually start off next episode with the ending from this one and they didn't expand on it. There is a lot more that I think that they can add to the first part of this fight after the Getsuga Grand Rei Cero to really pad it out versus what we see in the manga. But we'll see next week. I'll be back here next Saturday with another review. My name is Akuzella. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, turn on alerts. Peace out.